This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Full swing, full gear. Santa's on his sleigh. NBA games is on its way. And, we got to talk about the stuff that's happening in the association. Let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man. 50 grand, www.shawsports.net. Big Kahuna PNC, my brother from another mother. Mr. Warrenshaw repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. Woo! Another hot show on slate, man. You ready to go?
I am, man. Salute to all the fans listening to the Baseline. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm excited about this week's show. Great topic in the breakdown. We're going to have some back and forth conversation about some dudes who may not be on their teams moving forward. I think it's, an exciting time. And of course, down the line, talk a little bit of fantasy as well. And then, again, we're getting geared up for the holiday season right here, man. So ho, 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 and all that, on the Baseline, bro.
And you might catch why my man Shaw said that in our Coast to Coast segment. Shout out to our man Dirk Nowitzki. You'll understand. Anyway, great show on tap, man. In our segment of the drop, we have Adam Weinstein, CEO of Thrive Fantasy. He's going to hop on board to talk about a new DFS platform that is sure to catch not just the DFS savant, but will catch the eye of the casual DFS fan. You definitely want to check that out. And our subject of the breakdown, great topic of conversation. Of course, at the mind of my man Shaw, let's make a deal or no deal. We're going to talk about some of those off-season signings, trades, acquisitions. These guys are now eligible for trade. So what does that mean if they're on the trading block? Does it mean that the teams no longer are in favor of these dudes? Does it mean that things just didn't work out? Is the love gone? We're going to talk about some of those players that are part of that deal or no deal. Once again, we'd like to thank you and yours for tuning into the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. We're available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. We'll always ask you to download the application. Throw your headphones on, kick back, relax. Allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things happening in the association. You can always catch us exclusively on Dash Radio as well, too. Be sure to catch us on Tuesday mornings, 9 a.m. We like to give you that morning ride. Keep you up to date with what's happening with the NBA for the week. You know how we do, everybody. You know how we roll. Let's get this thing started. Time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it
I break it down to the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Callie Warrenshaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And topic of conversation for the breakdown. Let's make a deal. Players who were signed during the summer are now eligible to be traded. And with that being said, if these players are already on the trading block or in the breadth of conversation to be moved, what does that mean specifically? Does that mean that the team that did pick up that said player is now having buyer's remorse? Look, you can make the argument there's a few players that we already knew from the moment that they inked that deal or the moment that they got moved, that you would have to start questioning the motives and the moves of the organization, why they brought that player on board. And I think now we're starting to see some of that come to fruition. More notably, the craziness that ensued over the last 72 hours involving Trevor Ariza, who finally gets traded after I think we went through the whole Brooks family to be added in there. And so, Shaw, I think maybe this would be the best opportunity for us to lead in our conversation is, what our preemptive thoughts were about why Trevor Ariza was even in this conversation, the fact that Trevor Ariza became part of this conversation, and that now he is spearheading this conversation about buyer's remorse for some of these teams.
Phoenix was in a situation, more or less, that they signed Ariza, figuring they needed the good old veteran guy. Ariza bolted from Houston, not feeling appreciated, not getting the deal that he wanted in terms of the years, etc. Phoenix swoops in, says, all right, now we have a veteran guy to help lead these young Bucks. This will help us, and that'll steer the ship and lead the way. Not so fast. Phoenix realizes they're terrible. Ariza's leadership wasn't really going to do much for this team or this roster. They cut bait on Tyson Chandler, a few weeks back, and he ends up signing with the LA Lakers. And the report came out earlier in the week that, well, the Lakers were then just waiting for the 15th so that Ariza could potentially be traded to them. They were going to engage Phoenix in those conversations as well. Robert Sarver, being the gentleman that he is, was like, nah, I'm good on that. Didn't want to see another one of his players going to a Western Conference division rival in the LA Lakers. No, not trying to help LA. And I can appreciate his competitive spirit for that. Then ensues the madness between Memphis, Phoenix, and Washington. You know, the whole Brooks thing, and you can read up on that. We don't have time to cover that right now. But the main thing here is now Ariza actually
Oh,
does
sure
get
we do.
moved.
We always
as
have. We always have time to cover the absurdity.
Well,
But no.
that's kind of an indictment on Phoenix. I mean, on Memphis, I think here a little bit. But but everyone's pointing fingers like that Spider-Man meme. Like, you're pointing at me, I'm pointing at you. So no one really knows what happened there and why that didn't go down the way it did. But at the end of the day, Phoenix ends up with Kelly Oubre and Austin Rivers. Austin Rivers, another pseudo point guard. So we'll see what that situation looks like for Phoenix moving forward. But Ariza ends up in Washington on a team that desperately needs some chemistry building. Otto Porter is now banged up as well. We'll see what ends up happening if it ends up working out. But he definitely wanted to go to LA, and Robert Sarver put the kibosh on that potential trade.
Look, it ain't all good when an 85-year-old woman calls out the owner of the Phoenix Suns. If you're the Phoenix Suns and Greta Rogers has got you on her hit list, you really need to start rethinking about, your future as an owner for a franchise, straight up and down. And I think that to me is what's more telling about the Phoenix Suns and how they've just absolutely mismanaged this situation. They're like a walking contradiction right now. And I just don't quite understand the logic of it. So what you're telling me is that, and I know we're going to jump to some other players that are fall in line with this conversation, but what you're telling me is that you chose to sign Trevor Ariza because you wanted a veteran presence. Ergo, you still already had a veteran presence in Tyson Chandler. You then decide to buy out, or you decide to release Tyson Chandler so he can go with his veteran presence to go be with the team, when you could have moved Tyson Chandler over a year ago if this was all about veteran presence, assuming that Trevor Ariza with the Houston Rockets was going to give you equally the same amount of veteran presence that you now are saying is no longer necessary. So you decide to then move him. Look, man, I have no idea what the Phoenix Suns is trying to do. I don't know if this is buyer's remorse or podcast regret for the fact that we have to use the Phoenix Suns as an example for this nonsensical way that they go about doing business. And it's just a bad look overall. If you're going to play your young players, go play your young players and stop messing around with this idea that you actually need some veteran presence out there when this basketball team just needs to go out and learn how to win and lose basketball.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no doubt, and I think one of the issues that I have with the trade from the Phoenix side, not so much that they traded Ariza, but I guess it's the return they got back. Because while there's varying opinions on Kelly Oubre and how good he could potentially be. So I get it. You want to take a look at him, see what he's going to be about. Austin Rivers, I don't think is going to be part of their long-term goals. I'd be surprised if he finishes the season there. He could, but that's not really what my issue is. It's like, now you bring Oubre into this situation where you have Josh Jackson, you have TJ Warren, and you also have Mikal Bridges. So all these kind of wing players who quote unquote need minutes. And the sad thing is, remember at the beginning of this year, they tried to basically put TJ Warren on the bench and say, okay, he wasn't going to be the guy. They signed him to a middling deal, so to speak. But they really wanted to take a look at Josh Jackson and see what he was going to be about. And they realized Jackson isn't about anything right now at this stage of his career. And they inserted Warren, and Warren's doing a good job. But now you bring in Oubre, and I'm very confused as to how this is potentially going to shake itself out on this team. Like, there's a lot of confusion, I think, with these young guys and these wing players. Devin Booker finally coming back from yet another injury. But what's around him? And I think that's what Phoenix really needs to figure out moving forward.
Should have been about picks, man. It should have been about picks. I get this. I hear where you're coming from. Your approach is very diplomatic. It's very reserved in the way that what we're talking about is allowing another basketball team to say, we want to give this kid a look. We want to see if whether or not we can do something with him. The problem that I have is you got a bunch of players on that team that you're supposed to be doing something with, and you're doing nothing with them. You're not developing them. You are not implementing them in a system that makes sense for what you're trying to get out of, and it's not equaling out to wins. It's not equaling out to competitive play, right? And you just finished throwing the Brinks truck at Devin Booker to be the cornerstone of franchise of your team. So listen, I understand that the idea is that you're trying to build around something, but don't tell me that you're building a solid basketball team around scrap parts. In the Transformers show, that's called the Junkacons, right? I don't ever recall us talking about the Junkacons a whole bunch when we had the aerial bots and the Constructicons and all of these other high-fi, high-ended, and a lot of those were based off of a foundation, a principled measure of going out and getting something that you know that is tangible. And right now, draft picks for the Phoenix Suns would be more tangible than telling me that Kelly Oubre is a cornerstone piece or a piece that you can try and build around. So, like I said, a very diplomatic approach on your part to try and explain away the Phoenix Suns and the atrocities of what they've been doing. But under no circumstances, and I guess the other thing as well here too is, what does this say about Trevor Ariza? Because by every measure, what he gave the Houston Rockets, I don't know whether or not he's going to give that to any other basketball team at this particular juncture of his career. So what are we now saying for guys like a Trevor Ariza? We can flip the script and talk about how this could be players' remorse for going to Phoenix and putting yourself in this position, because now you're getting traded all over the place, and there's really no telling what you're going to be able to do for the next team that you go to, except you're assured that you got paid your money.
Well, I think for Ariza, again, he wanted to go to LA. And while he may have acted hastily, with Houston, it's like, all right, well, I'll show you. You don't want to give me my money. I'll go sign with Phoenix, and get this 1-year deal. All right, well, Phoenix is a cesspool. So now, like you said, he gets traded from the Junkacons. I do like that Transformer reference, especially with the Bumblebee movie coming out right now. Kudos to you. But now he goes to Washington. Is another ridiculous situation.
Ariza Dwayne Waded him. He Dwayne Waded the Phoenix Suns. That's what he did. He threw a DW on him.
Well, at least the Heat got something. Well, no, they didn't get anything.
Okay.
At least Phoenix. I'm saying at least Phoenix got something for a reason.
They got someone they can say Oubre. That's great. It's like.
But I don't know, man. I said again, Ariza's gonna have to now go there and and be the the undermining adult, so to speak, here in Washington. He's gonna have to all right, guys, let's get this on track and figure something out here. If we want to be a winning team in the Eastern Conference. And again, I don't know how serious this Otto Porter injury is. Ariza can come in there and play the three. Obviously, can play some small ball four as well too. Space the floor for Wall and Beal. But I think personally he can't be excited about this situation, especially if he had designs of joining LeBron and the Lakers.
Well, I will tell you this much: whichever Brooks that got traded in this, I think is uber happy. Kelly Oubre happy that he has an opportunity now to see some shine with the team that he's playing for. Let's go ahead and talk about some other teams or other players that will be involved in the breadth of our conversation. So I know, Shaw, that you had someone specifically in mind. Let's not futz around with it. Who is getting targeted in our conversation of let's make a deal or not deal?
Well, I think it's kind of an obvious situation now with Jabari Parker and Chicago Bulls. They signed him to that 2 years, $40 million team option in year 2 next season. And now all of a sudden Jim Boylan's there and Parker's out of the lineup, air quotes, not showing enough grit and hustle on the defensive end. This is a guy who in his press conference said they didn't bring me here to play defense. Well, now he's on the bench, not getting any minutes at all. And Casey Johnson, the great Bulls writers, reporting that Parker is being shopped. And there are teams interested. He is still averaging 15 and 7, on the year. Still relatively young. Yes, he has two knee surgeries and has come back from that. But the fact that it's a team option in year 2, I think, is what's attractive. So people say, you know what, we can take on whatever is left, that $16 or $17 million are left on his deal right now, and see what's good, for the rest of the season. Teams like the Miami Heat, I think, are going to be interested. Don't know what they'd be able to potentially give back. in that situation. But Atlanta, I think as well too, could they pair him alongside John Collins and Trey Young and try to build something there? With the core of Parker, Collins, and Young. I don't know. But there are a couple other teams too. I think that would be willing to take a flyer on Jabari this season based on kind of where he's at and the fact that again they don't have to lock up long-term money.
Let me just say this: Jabari Parker, what he did was such a boss move. I'm sorry, I just had a Jalen and Jacoby moment. I mean, I don't know too many players that just want to come out and say, look, man, you didn't bring me on here so I can play defense. And then expect to think that you should be playing with anyone on that basketball team, right? I'm sorry. Like, look, if everybody wants to believe this is Calspiracy theory coming right now. I just don't think that this is a Jabari Parker coming out of Duke University playing with the Milwaukee Bucks, who, listen, for all intents purposes, was supposed to be a cornerstone player for that basketball team. And if not for injuries, right, everybody would have been talking about he's the model player that you want to build around, right? Like if you had a Giannis Antetokounmpo, that should be Giannis's big brother right there. That was Jabari Parker. That comment that comes out of Jabari Parker sounds like a comment that comes out of dudes like, I don't know, Nick Young, Lance Stevenson, right? Like you're talented, but you're so full of yourself that you'll say anything knowing that you got your money, okay? I don't think he did this with some like, oh, it was just so off the cuff or he lost it right. No, he did this because I can't stand the Chicago Bulls. I can't stand Jim Boylan. And I just fleeced you people for $40 million. Move me. That's what he basically did. I mean, I don't care what anybody tells me. Y'all think I might be crazy for saying it. This is how I feel. He said that with the intent to say, get me up out of here. And you know what? I don't blame him. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it's just boss because of the fact that everyone looks at you in a specific kind of way. And to say that is so out of bounds for a player like him that just because it came out of his mouth. And if you're the Chicago Bulls, do you really afford the headache that's going to come with this? I mean, Jimmy Butler did that, and we've been questioning him since he's been with the Philadelphia 76ers. Now we don't question him anymore. So imagine what Jabari Parker going to look like playing for some other basketball team. Even if it's a basketball team that might be marginally better than the Chicago Bulls, but can't be worse than the Chicago Bulls. It could be worse than the Chicago Bulls, and he'll still go out there and produce more than what I think the Chicago Bulls got for signing him for the money that they paying him.
Well, I mean, again, I think there's context there. The main thing is that, again, this was his initial press conference. This wasn't a result of something that happened after Hoiberg was fired. He said this from jump, in mid-July or whatever when he signed in Chicago. So they should have known from then that, oh, snap, maybe we made a mistake. But they went out there and they played him anyway and did what they needed to do with it. And, I think when you look back, it's interesting to go back and retrace a statement like that, because now it's come back to bite him right in the ass, and now he's sitting on his ass on a regular basis.
But he's still getting paid. That's the thing. Yes, he's still getting paid. And look, you could put him on another basketball team, and he's going to go out there and he's going to give you something that those other teams are clearly going to be lacking. What I'm saying is that if you're the Chicago Bulls and your thought process, look, Fred Hoiberg obviously knew that he could get something out of Jabari Parker. Okay, so I don't know what Jim Boylan thinks that he's not getting out of Jabari Parker if Jabari Parker said what he said back during the summer. Because it wasn't like Jabari Parker came in here and was just stinking up the joint and still complaining. He just made it known. This is what I'm about right now. You understand that, and that's what you're paying me. And the head coach that I got right now is putting me out there, and I'm giving him exactly what I told you. Now, you fire the head coach and you bring in the assistant head coach, and the assistant head coach is going to bench him. Oh, but you don't have anybody that's going to go out there and do what Jabari Parker was giving you. I'm just saying, it's not a good look for the Chicago Bulls. It's just not.
Right. So I think there's other teams, like maybe Cleveland could take a flyer and try to look at him. They try to rebuild that franchise and that roster. The Knicks, it would be a tough fit based on what we just had a conversation about in terms of not really caring about defense. So those not really going to go for that. I think that would be setting up for failure. But then you always have, the teams that like to overdo it. We just talked about Phoenix. So, they just want talent. So they may go out there and try to make something for him. And then the Sacramento Kings, who have been really good this year, but you know how they like to get bigs. So, maybe they throw their name into the hat of that. I think that's a long shot right now, as I think Sacramento is turning a good corner for once. But I'm not surprised to know that there is interest in a guy, who's averaging 15 and 7. And again, offensively doing all right, rebounding doing all right. And then you just feel like he's a young guy who just maybe needs a mindset change. So there's going to be a market for him, and we'll see how long it takes for a deal to get done.
You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Our subject of the breakdown: let's make a deal or no deal. Players that have been signed or have been traded during the offseason, have they panned out for some of these teams that basically took a flyer? And we're just looking into the fact that now that a lot of these players are trade eligible, and if they're on the trading blocks, that's probably giving you your answer. All right, so I know one other person specifically you had, you're sitting there saying, shaking your head on, and I don't know how many times we don't mention this dude's name. We'd be remiss if this conversation did not have Dwight Howard's name in it. Albeit, though, I do think that if everybody is perceiving the fact that it's because of Dwight gonna be Dwight, I think it's a little unfair, and I think it would be a little bit disingenuous, because I think by all intents and purposes, Dwight really tried to make things work out there in Washington. The problem is the Washington Wizards and not Dwight Howard this time around.
Yeah, and Dwight's not healthy. So I mean, I think that's the biggest factor in any potential thing that could happen. His name hasn't been mentioned. Still no real timetable. Got that glute injury. Has that very, very bizarre situation that circulated about a couple weeks ago as well. Now too, with the alternate lifestyle. We'll just kind of leave it at that. And there's just stuff that people don't want to bring around in their locker room. But I don't feel like the Washington Wizards really feel like, okay, Dwight Howard was the right move. Again, it was a boom or bust type of situation. We said that to the very beginning of the year. Either this was going to work or it was going to fail miserably. There was really kind of no in between. And it's failed miserably only because he hasn't been there to be healthy. He's played what, like I think 11 games or something like that. So, I think if they can figure out a way to get Dwight Howard off their roster, the Washington Wizards will be excited, to see if they can do anything with that. But again, I just don't know if there's going to be any suitors for Howard at this stage of his career, especially what he's bringing to the locker room in terms of the distractions that surround him.
The last time that we talked about Dwight Howard in any level of significance, not of controversy, was when he was with a tandem of him and Jameer Nelson. You know how far back we're going when we bring up those two names like that? So name me a particular situation where Dwight Howard would have had those kind of opportunities. You can try and sell me on the idea that that may be the case with John Wall, but John Wall had his own issues to deal with that Washington franchise, right? He's got his own thing going on, and again, when you have a player like Dwight Howard, he's not somebody that he just figures it out in an off season, man. This is something that takes time. He's got to have something going with that point guard, with that shooting guard, with that versatile, point forward or point guard, whatever the case may be. And that's just never happened. And I don't understand why these organizations keep trying to sell people on this idea that they were going to get out of Dwight Howard what Dwight Howard gave the Orlando Magic some 10 plus years ago. That's just not who he is. It's not how it's been. And that's not how everything is set up with these organizations. So, if the intent was they needed a quick fix because they lost Marcin Gortat. Yeah, I understand that part of it, but at least with Marcin Gortat, who came out of that Orlando Magic threshold, right, was a better fit for the Washington Wizards and was more amenable to what needed to be done to get that team to play better basketball. If people, do or don't want to believe it, I don't know where you would have found that with Dwight Howard.
Again, just scathing in a lot of ways. He's toxic to the touch for whatever reason. I had nothing against Dwight. Just can only go by everything that you've heard, and some of the stuff that you read about Dwight, and he's not in the situation right now where he's really ready to contribute to a winning basketball team. Let's move on though. A couple other guys touch on. I think the Lakers are gonna start to be players, as we alluded to. They were interested in Ariza. Rumored float out that KCP would be the guy that they were trying to move around in some other pieces. So I do feel like some of those cast-offs or those weird signings that they did, now that they're eligible to be moved, like the Michael Beasleys, the JaVale McGee's, Rondo, Lance Stevenson, like I think any one or two of those guys could could potentially be moved. Brandon Ingram's name.
Sure, I have a quick question to ask you. So, with regards to KCP, right, and for our listeners, that's Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He's been re-signing with the Los Angeles Lakers now over the course of the last couple of years. I'm just curious, like, if you're the Los Angeles Lakers, I'm trying to understand where his level of importance really falls in line with what they're trying to do now, especially with having LeBron James and what he's sort of getting out of some of these guys that you're also mentioning as well too. Is he falling out of favor and easily one of those people that you can kind of make this argument about, well, did we really actually need him again for this season?
Yeah, I don't think the Lakers need him. I really do feel like his second year here in LA is more of a LeBron James special with KCP being part of Clutch Sports. So money wasn't really there for him. The years weren't really there for him. So all right, here's 12 million. We need a starting two guard. Go out there and let's ride for a year and see how it works out. Josh Hart started off very hot and was supposed to be taking KCP's job. I think Hart has come back to the pack a little bit. I want KCP to kind of get back into the rotation some. But Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was not a part of the Lakers' plans moving forward. So that's why his name is being mentioned in trade rumors. And I think that, there'll be some suitors, especially, again, a one-year deal. A guy who came into the league, was a pretty solid defender. I don't think those metrics really support that right now. Has improved the three-point shooting. And again, is a decent NBA player, but really not a part where the Lakers are going to want to do long term here moving forward. So we'll see what happens and what team shows some interest in KCP, if any, as the Lakers try to make a move. I'm sure they're not done trying to make moves this year while LeBron is there in year one.
All right, but outside of KCP, who else do you think should be up out of there? If they can
in
get
LA?
something else, yeah.
Yeah, in LA, I think they'll look, to see if there's anything for Lance Stevenson. They'll find that market to be very dry, I'm sure. If you listen to some of the reports from some of our other friends on Twitter, like a Scoop Beat Robinson, he says, Lonzo and Ingram, their names are being mentioned. They're still monitoring the situation very close in New Orleans to see what ends up happening with Anthony Davis. I'd just be stunned if Davis gets moved this year in season. I can very much see something happening over the summer. But those are the guys, they're going to try to build something around LeBron. So they'll see what happens. And without any marquee names being readily available right now, they just kind of have to stand pat. But I think they're starting to float names out there and let them know, hey, Ingram's available. Hey, Lonzo Ball will be available. But it's going to have to be for a monster package that gets LeBron, a clear number two guy to help them on that team.
I'm really curious, y'all, because I've seen the rumors being floated around, especially by our boy Scoop B, regarding Anthony Davis being a Laker and things of that nature. And to me, I think it kind of falls in line with this whole premise about, let's make a deal or no deal here. If you're the New Orleans Pelicans and you felt compelled that you needed to throw money, out, to keep Anthony Davis, the idea now that you're gonna send him, say, to the Los Angeles Lakers, and if you're the Pelicans, like, why feel compelled that you have to send him to the Lakers? Like, what exactly is it that the Lakers are going to truly offer you that is going to be compensatory to the caliber of player in an Anthony Davis?
There's no real compensation with a guy like that. Like, you'll never get true fair market value back unless you're getting LeBron James back. And, that's obviously not what the situation is. So they're going to have to make a decision, if that's the decision that they do decide to make, that, all right, what's the best thing for us? And that's going to set us up for the future. Do we get enough young guys that can help us right now, and then enough draft picks as well, too, to help us build for the future on top of it? I just don't think that's the situation the Lakers have. If, we can talk about Anthony Davis here really quickly. If the Pelicans at some point decide to move on from him, it's not the Lakers I'm calling, but it also depends on how big of a future or how high is the ceiling that you think are for guys like Kyle Kuzma, Brandon Ingram, and even maybe Lonzo Ball. What is their ceiling to you? And the book on Ingram is vast. There's people who think, okay, that's a potential all-star, and there's guys like, hey, he's a rotation player. So I'm on the latter side, where I think he's more of a rotation player, a good rotation player, but I don't think Brandon Ingram's a star, but others do. So that's where, when it comes to Lakers, you have to kind of figure that out. I'm still looking at, a team like Boston and their a treasure chest of players and potentially even picks before I'd go to the LA if I'm the New Orleans Pelicans.
Can I just put something out there, Shaw? Like, just want to keep this 100, and no disrespect, really no disrespect, to Brandon Ingram. I think he can be a solid player in the league. Okay, but by the time his career ends, he will have more tattoos than any all-star appearances. Okay, like that's just how I feel. I don't understand what the hype is about Brandon Ingram. Yeah, his length, and his smooth touch is nice, but it's not translating to anything that is telling me that you're gonna if you're trying to make a play to move him to get an Anthony Davis like type of player, holding him back would like, yeah, if I'm the Lakers, no, we can't move Brandon Ingram. Like, no, come on, man, like seriously, like
But if you're in New Orleans, does Ingram, like, let's say most people are saying they're only going to give up two of those three. Well, let's say, well, whatever, grandfather deal or Godfather, not grandfather, Godfather deal. We'll give you Ingram, Ball, and Kuzma, and a future first round pick. Does that get the deal done for Anthony
no.
Davis?
Because to me, it's more about Kuzma. I feel Kuzma has more upside to be a starlet in the NBA than I do see Brandon Ingram. I think Brandon Ingram has to be in the right situation. He has to have something with the coach for him to go out there and do what everyone is saying that he's going to do. He's no Joel Embiid, right? He's not coming in, but it just, in my opinion, everyone gauged him in that kind of way. But there's never been a situation where we've seen Brandon Ingram, and when there has been, he's never gone out and taken it. So I don't understand like how so far now into his career, because I don't know how far you need to go into for us to be making these kind of proclamations. I'm just saying Brandon Ingram doesn't tilt the meter for me when we're talking about Anthony Davis type of talent. Now, Kyle Kuzma, on the other hand, I think is possible. And this, again, is another situation that we have with Kyle Kuzma, being around a LeBron James like Andre Wiggins would have been around a LeBron James. How much longer do we start diminishing the talent level of a Kyle Kuzma because LeBron James is a part of that franchise than it would be if he was going somewhere else, and us being able to determine if he could have been that guy?
Well, I agree. I think Kuzma has a lot more upside than Ingram right now at this stage. And Kuzma is better than Lonzo Ball at this stage. So, I think the conversation start with that. But is Kuzma, is he a guy who's always going to be pretty good and can get you some good points and some rebounds, or is he legit like a star you can count as a guy
I
to
don't know if
build
we're
a
ever going to
team
know if
around?
he's playing next to LeBron James. I'll be honest
Well,
with
and
you.
I think, and that's the
Yeah.
same situation with Ingram. Obviously, I feel like we've gone back and forth, with different people on our podcast, and a guy like Jabari Davis, like, hey, Ingram, has the potential to be a most improved player and things of that nature. Playing aside LeBron and all that could potentially at some point be true, but Ingram can never really be Ingram if LeBron is there, just because of the skill set and the way that LeBron plays. So I feel like one or both of those guys will need to get off that team to maybe realize their full potential one way or the other, and then or maybe even be exposed if it's the latter. Like we just don't know. So again, that's one situation with the LA Lakers. With the December 15th deal as well too. As we move on, again, it's going to come up. Carmelo, it's finally time where he can be moved. So there's an opportunity to get him out of there. And on a lesser note, a guy like Jahlil Okafor, who I think is just kind of toiling away in New Orleans. He's gone there. He's really like the third or fourth big on that team. I think New Orleans, may look to maybe see if they can get any type of depth, maybe in the backcourt for Jalil. But again, I feel like it's a situation where people are all right. We know who he is, and we're not interested. So, but I feel like the Pelicans might, maybe kick the tires on a Jalil Okafor deal as well too.
It's possible. Again, it's kind of an unfortunate circumstance. I thought that maybe Jahlil Okafor could kind of leapfrog, but I could also see why Alvin Gentry is leaning on the hybrid style of roster moves that he normally does. And if you have such a one-dimensional player like Jahlil Okafor, I just don't know where you fit or find a way to get him in there. I thought that some of the opportunities would have opened up for him, especially with Nikola Mirotic. I think he had gone down injury, for an extended period of time. But with the way that Julius Randle is playing and Julius Randle's versatility, it diminishes the one-dimensionality of a Jahlil Okafor. And if you're someone like Alvin Gentry, who is constantly going to be on the hot seat, and now with the swirling rumors is circulating about possibly moving Anthony Davis, you have to start wondering how long you have as a head coach to be. So you got to win as many games as possible with Anthony Davis. They've got to be playoff relevant, meaning you've got to use him as much as possible, which means that guys like Jahlil Okafor become, dust on the seat, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you just handing out paper cups to dudes, or you just moving one seat over to the right or left for that guy who's going to be taking a spell, also taking your minutes. So that to me is how I see it. I want you to give me, Shaw, before we jump off, before we end this, but I want you to give me that one dude, that long shot deal or that long shot trade or signing that we didn't expect, but we recognize it and we see it as saying, "Damn, I know this team regretted that they shouldn't have messed with this kid."
From this past summer, I mean, I think we definitely touched on it already, and I think it's Jabari for sure for Chicago, and then or it'd be Dwight in Washington, where they just he became available, and they were like, "Oh, look what we found! All right, well, bump it, let's give it a shot." I think all the other deals primarily, they're while maybe not everyone's like burning it up or tearing things up, so to speak, they're just like, all right, here's a situation that they're in. They kind of understand it. There's another handful of guys that will become available January 15th, as well too. I look at a guy like who we continue to bag on this show, but Rodney Hood. Hey, your time in Cleveland could be up, coming up here in a month's time or so to speak. But everybody else, I think outside of the guys we already mentioned, maybe you could say Alex Len in Atlanta, perhaps, maybe, like, all right, do they really need him? But outside of that, I think everyone else is pretty solid with what they did.
All I can tell you, Shaw, is the next time that you bring up Rodney Hood's name, and I'm trying to remember, I think it's MC8, right? I think it's MC8, Growing Up in the Hood. I think it's his song. Yeah. Every time you mention his name, I think I'm gonna find a sample. I'm gonna play him. That's gonna be his theme music. It's gonna be intro music. And it's kind of sad because I know Rodney Hood probably wasn't born when that song came out, right? Like this boy's so young, and yet he's an OG in this game, man. It's just like, it's so bad. It's just, what do you do with this, man? Like growing up in the hood. I'm sorry, but
there's moves Cleveland needs to make, and that's one of them. They still have to figure out the J.R. Smith situation as well too. So again,
it's not good when Rodney Hood is in trade conversations first before they figured out what to do with J.R. Smith. If you're J.R. Smith, you can't be in a good place when Rodney Hood is getting more discussion.
You talk about a guy. You talking about a guy stealing money. You talk about Jabari just sitting on the bench and collecting that $20 million. I mean, JR is not even with the team. He's not even on the bench. He's home with his kids, doing God knows what with God knows who as well too in the evening time. So JR is living his best life for real right now, not having to worry about practice, not having to worry about playing on a bad Cavs team, and still collecting a check while they try to figure out something to do with him.
Definitely. I heard Howie Mandel needs some other special guests for his new Deal or No Deal. They can give Jabari and JR Swish a shout. They got time. Yeah, you're tuned to the baseline. Cali, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. This was the breakdown. Time now for the drop. Cali, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. This week on the drop, we have with us, as usual, we keep rolling them out. And we always enjoy having people coming on board, not just to talk about sports, but also to talk about the impact that they're having on sports, specifically with the NBA. Right now, there is a fantasy platform that I think a lot of people need to check out. I know a lot of people get caught up with the whole hoopla between DraftKings and FanDuel, but I believe that this fantasy platform has a different twist, and one that will make the casual fan feel appreciative of having fantasy in their life. It's called Thrive Fantasy, and with this, we have the CEO, Adam Weinstein, joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Adam, thanks for hopping on board with this, man.
Thanks, guys. Much appreciated.
So talk to us about Thrive Fantasy and why exactly is this a break from the normal talk that people get caught up in when we talk about fantasy sports with DF fantasy style type of platforms? What is it about this platform that everyone should uniquely distinguish themselves if we ever bring up the names FanDuel, DraftKings, and those type of platforms?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So first and foremost, the biggest problem on FanDuel and DraftKings is that such a small percentage of users win all the money. All these professional sharks are taking the casual fan dollar pretty much in every contest. So I really wanted to create something that would be much easier for the casual fan to compete at a consistent and a high level at. So we created Thrive Fantasy. It's essentially daily fantasy sports, but the game concept is revolved around prop bets. So we give the user a list of 20 prop bets for a given night. So LeBron James over under 25 points tonight, or Anthony Davis over 10.5 rebounds. You pick 10 out of the 20 props, and you go up against other users, and it's a lot of fun. Really unique, really different, and people seem to really enjoy it.
So how long have you been kind of at this? How long has Strive been around, and what's your overall background that made you get into this to begin with?
So I actually I went to school, UMass Amherst, for sport management. So I've been in the sports industry for quite some time. I worked at the Yankees as a premium sales rep for 3 years prior to founding this company back in 2016. So definitely have a background experience in this field. And we launched in April of 2018, but we were actually in beta for about 8 months. So we've been doing this for quite some time now.
Adam Weinstein joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. He is the CEO for Thrive Fantasy. If people want to check out where to locate that, go to www.thrivefantasy.com. So the first thing that I think that's important for people is where the accessibility for the platform. Is this primarily a platform for mobile app users, or is this a platform that is available for people who access their fantasy, their DFS style type of play on desktop consoles?
Yeah, so we're on iOS, Android, and web, so you can definitely find us pretty much on any type of platform that you want to engage with. But I know like the casual fan is more who's putting in 1 or 2 lineups. They love our app. They think it's really easy, very user friendly. And then the guys who are putting in the 10, 20, 30 lineups, I know they really like the desktop because it's much easier to put in a lot of things at once.
So talk to us a little bit about, I guess, the player pools, so to speak. So if it's all kind of like the same type of game, because I guess some of the other platforms and sites they started streaming types of games. You know, you can do 5, then you can drop 1, and then you're picking only 1 game. You know, what are the different types of styles you can play, and how large are the player pools that are offered through Thrive?
Yeah, absolutely. So we pretty much only have 2 different types of concepts. So the one I aforementioned was traditional, where we give you a list of 20 props, and it's just LeBron James over under. And then we also have it's called a versus contest. So for today, we had like Tom Brady total passing yards plus 5.5 versus Big Ben, or LeBron James total points plus 2.5 versus KD. So really unique, really easy. In terms of the player pools, we're definitely still small. We don't have those $1 million contests or guarantees like the big guys do, but we're growing. We do give away over 5K in guarantees every week. We did have a pretty big NFL contest today, over $3,000 guaranteed. So by no means are we putting out hundreds of thousands of dollars, but if you're a DFS player, and we have some nice deposit bonuses, we still have players who are really new. So definitely you can take advantage on our platform.
Adam, one of the focuses that I've noticed, or maybe that point of emphasis that the application provides people, is that you guys are focused on the top tier athletes. Is that absolute?
There's no recipe or exact definition on who a top tier athlete is, but you just won't see the backup center for the Suns or the wide receiver 4 of the Vikings. And that was a big thing that we wanted to address as well. The reason that the casual guy gets crushed on these bigger sites is the guys who are putting out 100 lineups, they'll take flyers and do these crazy Hail Marys with the wide receiver 3 who ends up going for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, right? Or the guy who goes for 25 and 10, who no one really thought about in basketball. So we wanted to stick to the guys that, again, everybody knows those are the ones that you want to watch also. No one really cares about 80% of the NFL players. They only want to engage with the Ezekiel Elliott's or Saquon Barkley. So, yes, to answer your question, we do have new types of players come on in terms of top tier talent. Like if someone's going off constantly, we'll throw them in the contest. But for the most part, you'll see the household names for the foreseeable future.
So, Adam, what's your favorite sport? As a guy who graduated sports management degree, what sport kind of, gets you going? And, by virtue of going to UMass, or are you by default Boston, New England guy, or, kind of, who are some of your favorite teams out there?
Yeah, no, I'm actually a New York guy. I'm born and raised in Westchester. So I was definitely in for a long and rude awakening when I went to UMass for 4 years. But we actually took them in the Super Bowl my senior year of college. It was
props to, I didn't mean to interrupt, but props to you on that, Adam. I mean, you went to
I appreciate that.
There's many people out there that we would be considered outcasts. You can't live in New York and be a Boston Celtics fan. You can't live in Boston and be a New York Yankees fan. It would be blasphemous, and therefore you would be considered the black sheep of all of sports. So I congratulate you to living your best life thus far in spite of these circumstances.
Yeah, I would probably be excommunicated from my family if I stayed away from New York sports. But my senior year in college, it was actually Giants-Pats, and obviously we took that one down. So I ran out of my buddy's apartment really quick after the last second to make sure that I didn't get hurt. But so my favorite sport is basketball. My favorite team is the Yankees. I know that's a little weird, but that I'm just born and raised in a really good time for the Yankees. So that definitely has my heart. But I'm a basketball guy through and through.
So that something I've been always kind of curious about, Adam, really is how do these things get really funded? So are you, dipping into your own pocket? And I mean, I know it sounds a little crazy, but how do these player pools kind of come in? Obviously, the guys come in, and that's supposed to help, kind of generate the money to begin with. But what's the startup capital? Where does it come from? Is it sponsorships? How do you start this up when you're, just beginning with your platform?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So with any startup, you definitely need capital raising and seed money. I actually raised some money from friends and family, and I've put in a good amount of my own dollars. But we are looking to raise right now. People seem to really like what we're doing, getting investor interest. And then with that, we'll have bigger prize pools, bigger contests, more money to be made. But for any startup, you really gotta be passionate and be determined to get it off the floor.
Adam, one of the you mentioned that basketball is your favorite sport, and so one of the interesting things that I've come across with the DFS experience is the ebb and flow that tends to happen because obviously the focus and the attention is on the sport that's in the now. So right now, NBA is in its beginning stages, its fledgling stages of the season. Everyone's attention is completely fixated on the back end of the NFL season. How do you guys transition this to continue to grow the number of users, the number of people that are going to be a part of the Thrive experience? What are the things that you guys like to do to put the emphasis and the onus on the uniqueness of your brand? Especially when it comes to these transitional periods where basketball may not have the highlight, appeal to everybody, but certainly a part of the prop bet movement, that is something that a lot of people could possibly appeal to.
Yeah, no, that's a loaded and great question. But
I like to put a couple in the chamber to give you an opportunity there. So
yeah, I mean, we're always trying and testing out new ideas and concepts to really market and get more of the user base. But yeah, it's tough. Most people really only care about NFL as you're mentioning right now. But what's nice about NBA is it's every night. So the more people that are seeing this, that they definitely do want to engage with us every night. But we're also going to be adding more sports. So we're going to be doing PGA, MMA, and then ultimately esports for prop bets. So what's really nice about a prop bet, you can pretty much have 1,000 prop bets on one game or one contest. So it's really limitless when it comes to opportunities here.
I'm a little surprised though that you don't have like tennis or maybe some of the more underappreciated sports out there, like volleyball, things of that nature, which, for the genuine person, bowling, because now, I mean, I know it's a little crazy and you can't throw a ton of money at that, but for the purposes of prop bets, I'm sure that there's a lot of, unusual and very appealing props that you could probably put out there that would draw people's attention if they're not specifically aligned to baseball, basketball, or football.
If you guys can get me 100 people who will put dollars down on the bowling props, I'll make that for you next week. But
hey man, I got a bunch of people on my Wednesday night league that might be down for the cause, man.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, right now we're definitely doing the 3 major sports. With that said, I'm open to adding more differentiators and products out there, but I don't see bowling on the docket for the foreseeable future.
Not for 2019, 2020 yet. Okay. Okay. Fair enough.
Maybe.
Fair enough.
Last one before I let you get out of here, man. Just the name itself, who came up with it? How'd you come up with it? Why call it Thrive?
Sure. Yeah. So it actually started out as props to fantasy, P2F. I like the double entendre. We're giving props to fantasy and then obviously prop bets for fantasy. But I talked to a lot of advisors, and they said you shouldn't have the word props because at the time, sports betting wasn't legal, so it was more of a taboo word. So they didn't want to deal with all those allegations and what's going on with sports betting and all that. But yeah, we changed it from props. I spent hours and hours on a good name, and my cousin just said, "Hey, try out Thrive Fantasy. Ask what people thought," and it just stuck. Now we obviously call it Thrive. It's short for Thrive Fantasy, but yeah, it just came about pretty organically from one of my family members.
He is the CEO for Thrive Fantasy. Be sure to catch them. They're on the major platforms. You could also catch them on Twitter. If you're not sure, you can catch it. You can download on the Android or the iOS application. As my man Adam has just also alluded to, it is a great fantasy experience. Whether you are a novice or you are savant, it is definitely something you want to check out. It's Thrive Fantasy. Adam, we thank you so much for hopping on board with us this week, man, and giving us the goods on a great application. I look forward to playing it myself, man.
Really, really appreciate it. Yeah, definitely hit us up on Twitter, on social. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. We're here for the people. Like we're not trying to do this and just make this something that everybody's not excited about it and engaging with. So much appreciated, guys, for having me. We'll definitely see you on the platform, and let's chat soon.
All right. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time to go coast to coast discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
All right. Season debut for Dirk Nowitzki, a.k.a., as my man Shaw will call him, Dirk Diggler. Making his 21st season. I don't know if that makes him a wily NBA veteran or a great porn veteran, but nevertheless, he definitely showed up and showed out. Unfortunately, the Mavs took an L against the Phoenix Suns, but I think we can safely say, man, it's great to see Dirk back in the mix.
Yeah, one of the game's true great good guys, if you will, and truly a symbolic hero in Dallas. So his presence is exactly that. It's cosmetic. Don't expect a lot from him from a statistical standpoint throughout the course of this season, but as a guy who means everything to the Dallas Mavericks organization and everything in that locker room, a good leader, a guy who can help Luka kind of take the reins of this franchise and usher in the next generation. I think this is a great move for Dallas, and I'm happy he's back. Hopefully he can stay healthy for the duration of the season.
All right, speaking of debuts out in Houston, Brandon Knight is ready to make his presence felt. Houston Rockets certainly need some depth in that point guard position, and so D'Antoni's got another player to work with.
Yeah, what a battle, for BK, and finally he's back, and hopefully he can stay on the court this time and give Houston the injection that they need. MCW really hasn't done much for them, in the backcourt situation behind Chris Paul. Chris Paul has really struggled this year, so hopefully Knight can get back up to speed. And be a lightning bolt coming up the bench and get them some, like I said, like a little bit of push offensively, and a guy who can also just rock a little bit as well.
And finally, Shaw, man, I think this is great news to end off our coast to coast. We've had our man on this show. He's been doing it big, and I'm certainly the Brooklyn Nets felt that it's only right that they keep him on that squad. They've extended him to a 3-year, $34 million deal. Man, it's the year to Dinwiddie, Shaw. Year to Dinwiddie.
Yo, what a ride for Spencer Dinwiddie right now. I feel like he has just blossomed in the last year and change, and now he gets his come-ups with, Brooklyn and getting that 3-year deal. I believe it's a player option, I think, in the third year, so that he can go back in free agency and maybe earn some more cash out there. So he launched his shoe, doing great things on and off the court as well. It gets a 3-year deal right after he dropped his career high as well, 39 points, I believe it was. So shout out to Spencer Dinwiddie and the Brooklyn Nets for making this marriage happen. Meanwhile, D'Angelo Russell is sitting there like, hey, bro, what about me? He's got to wait to see what happens to him within the summer. But I think that's very interesting that Brooklyn has committed to Dinwiddie and not so much to D'Angelo Russell at this time.
Hey, man. Maybe LeVar Ball needs to take some notes. That's how you big baller brand right there, right? You know what I'm saying? You create the shoe, then you get the contract extension. Yeah, I definitely think that those shoes are gonna move off the shelves. Definitely. Our man Spencer Dinwiddie, congratulations again. We definitely gonna have to figure out a way to get him back on the show, man, to give so he could talk about that experience. But much props to him, man. It's well deserved. He's done a lot. He's put in that work, man. He's definitely shining and has been an intricate part to the competitive play for the Brooklyn Nets moving forward. This has been an awesome show, Shaw, once again. Great to have another guest on board and, dabbling a little bit into the fantasy experience. Great conversation and a breakdown all around. Good show getting us geared up for the holidays.
Man, the holidays could not be any hotter, and our show could not be any better. As always, kudos to you. And always salute to all the fans and listeners of our show. We appreciate you so much. Happy holidays, and thanks so much for tuning in with us for another week.
Definitely, and be sure to catch us. We are going to give you our previews for the Christmas Day shows, so, definitely catch the Baseline NBA podcast. Our next episode will not disappoint. Once again, special shout out and thank you to our man, Adam Weinstein from Thrive Fantasy. For the Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw. We appreciate you guys, each and every single one of you. And we'll catch up with you next time.